Hi everyone, Zipthany Zooptano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Sons of Kemet album, Your Queen is a Reptile. This is the third full-length commercial album from the London-based jazz outfit, an album that I would love to see go down as one of the more exhilarating jazz records of 2018. It's one of those albums that works in layers, and a record that the band clearly tried to conceptualize in multiple ways. From the focus on different female figures throughout Black history, tributed in name in the track list, each of which seems to be an answer to the title of the album, My Queen is This Person, Your Queen is a Reptile, which right from the get-go on this album seems like a kind of aggressive and radical shot at the monarchy. And then we have the passionate spoken word passages that run throughout the intro and outros of this record, both of which feature poet Josh Adehin in the track My Queen is Ada Eastman. In this track he goes into his background as an immigrant, he's telling off the Tories, he's giving all of these frustrated, revolutionary, aggressive proclamations. His performance on the track My Queen is Doreen Lawrence is just as explosive at some points and features a lot of rhetoric about getting the UK back on track and calling out racism. Going further into the record, then there is the band's very interesting instrumental setup, which at its core is two drummers, tuba, and saxophone, which on paper might not seem like much. You have 4 players and half of them are percussion, but this record is filled with uniquely groovy and deeply rhythmic sounds, right down to the horn playing, which a lot of the time isn't very smooth. For much of this record, the sax and tuba kind of lock into these staccato phrasings where they just continually blurt and squawk out these hot blasts of brass, occasionally pulling out these really quick, speedy, hooky melodies and riffs that become more and more hypnotic as the band jams on them. There's such a communal momentum and just vibe to the performances on this record, and given just how many polyrhythms are worked into the instrumentation, this could just be my American biases coming in here, but there's something about it that feels a lot like an old school New Orleans jazz band. Again, could be where I'm from, kind of pouring through, could just be the way that the drums sound against the tuba, as many contemporary jazz bands don't even bother to try to incorporate tuba into their sound. The timbre of their instrumentation gives Sons a feel that comes off just generations old, but their compositional, their performance style is wild, it's crazy, it's contemporary. Of course, there are stylistic parallels between this record and African music, Caribbean music as well, as the track My Queen is PHIPPS Clark sees the band working through this psychedelic fusion of dancehall and like dub reggae with very springy echoes on the vocals, which of course are delivered by Congo Natty, who is one of many collaborators that pop up on this record here and there just to add maybe a little bit of extra horn in the background or something. But really the core and the excitement of this album doesn't come necessarily straight from the guests, but again, just the core of the band and the jams that they embark on this record. Every single one of them that is up-tempo is really electrifying. And again, more dynamic than one might assume given just drums, tuba, and sax. The rhythms are typically what manage to change shape and evolve and grow and shrink in size across a lot of these tracks. Meanwhile, the sax and tuba harmonize, they reinforce, and they bounce off of each other really well. And the chemistry that Sons have on this record is so good that it's hard to tell when they're just kind of jamming, just kind of riffing, just kind of going off, or they've transitioned into a spot that is a little bit more composed or just with more preconception, like the authoritative and beautiful sax leads that open up the closing track to this thing, which were clearly written, or the bouncy, heavy, deep, subterranean tuba lines on PHIPPS Clark. I guess what I'm trying to say is whether it's improvised or whether it's written, there's always a strong sense of direction and a lot of muscle to the playing. And when the band does manage to go off on a jam, it's just so easy to get lost in their doing, which is, you know it's some good improv when you just kind of get overwhelmed by it and it just kind of shorts your circuits, especially when there's just really strong rhythmic backing on these tracks. Like on the song My Queen is Harriet Tubman, I love the drums on this track. There's just so much propulsion. The horns all over this track are just darting left and right really intensely. And this is one of the moments on the album where I feel like the music really has a very clear and direct connection to the person is trying to tribute. I mean, given Harriet Tubman's story and everything she needed to do to free slaves, the fact that there is, I guess, a kind of speed, an urgency to the horns on this track only makes sense. The song Nanny of the Maroons as well, given the time frame of her life as well as her Jamaican heritage, the primordial feel of the rhythms on this track just feel centuries old. There's a beautiful old mellow simplicity specifically to this track that just isn't anywhere else. And it seems like an effort not only to tribute her historical figure, but also maybe to create something that she might have even listened to or had enjoyed. I know historically that's a little bit of a stretch, but still, I don't know, that's just the vibe I got off this track. I also love the subtle intro and the progressively blossoming jam on the track My Queen is Julia Cooper. It's one of the softest songs on the entire record, and yet also one of the grooviest. I also love in the second half how the band sort of becomes scattered at one point. It's like the instrumentation just isn't matching up, but very intentionally, and then all of a sudden they just reform and just come back together quickly, locking onto the tempo once again. There's also a really amazing and explosive transition in the second half of the track My Queen is Angela Davis, where the tempo, rhythm, really everything picks up, and God, it's just such a night and day difference from this originally very smooth introduction, which of course was beautiful, gorgeous, and then all of a sudden the tuba starts boop-a-doo-doo, 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 boop-a-doo, and just it's just off to the races. You know, the band doesn't really come at these tracks any one way. If I have any nitpick on the record overall, the more subtle moments I think could have used a bit more finesse or could have been a bit more melodic. I get some of the more aggressive spots being as rudimentary harmoniously as they are, because you know you're kind of swapping some of that melody, that harmony out for the rhythm, the drive, the push, the explosivity. And while the more mellow moments on this record are nice breathers, and for the most part they're not skippable, they're not terrible, but the structure of these tracks doesn't seem nearly as clear or as well assembled as that of some of the more aggressive cuts. That, and I found the inclusion of vocals on the record to be a little odd, only for several of the cuts on the album to feature them. Not that I think it needed to be on the entire album, but to have two of those three vocal cuts kick the entire album off, it almost sets an expectation for the rest of the LP that just doesn't follow through. Outside of that though, this is a really great LP. Super enjoyable, great recording, great performances, good writing, interesting instrumental combination, great chemistry, interesting concept, and there's certainly something radical and revolutionary and bold about the message of this record as well that I respect. I'm feeling a strong 8 to a light 9 on this thing. Transition, have you given this record a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another review you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, forever.